Welcome to the Action for ME AGM 2020. Hopefully, on your screen in front of you, you can see Sonya Chowdhury, our Chief Executive, Marsden, our Treasurer, Sam Bromley, who will be coordinating events for us today, and myself, Roger Siddle, Chair of Trustees. These are challenging times. These have been challenging times, especially for people with ME, many of whom have years of experience of some form of lockdown, and then COVID creates new challenges for people whose very few things they relied upon to be able to live independently were taken away very quickly. My first board meeting as Chairman of Trustees in March 2020, held in the then unfamiliar environment of Zoom, we had to address how to ensure that Action for ME remained able to maintain a clear focus on the needs of people with ME, remained able to provide our essential services, whilst at the same time facing significant potential challenges to our ability to raise funds. And we had to make some difficult decisions. But it's also been a period with some really exciting news for people with ME, with the announcement of the important Decode ME project, the world's biggest study of the causes of ME. And your charity, and especially Sonya, along with many others, has played an important role in this project. So we'll be talking in greater detail about the events of the year during the meeting. But firstly, let me welcome our trustees, although apologies for their absence from Colin Batten and Alison Deeth. Let me also welcome our president, Claire Francis. But most importantly, let me welcome all of you, our members, our supporters, our volunteers, and indeed anybody else who has joined us today. This is our first ever fully online AGM. It is being recorded so that those unable to attend can watch later through our website and social media, but only those presenting will be visible in the film. We will be hearing from some children, adults and families who've used our services over the last year, and from some people who've supported our work over the last year, and we'll be doing so through films which will be shared throughout the AGM. And we hope very much that this will bring our work to life. There will be an opportunity to ask questions. We'll do that at the end of sessions rather than during presentations. And our preferred route is that you use the chat function to raise questions, but we do understand that many people will find it difficult to type. And in those circumstances, please do feel free to use the raise hands facility, and Sam will introduce you and unmute you. If we're unable to address questions during the meeting due to time constraints, or we'll need to get additional data, we will be following up after the meeting. Minutes of the meeting are being taken by our Operations Director, Ruth Richardson, and at the end of the meeting, we'll be sending out a link to all registered attendees to allow us to get some feedback via a short survey to help us create better events in the future. But now on to the business of the day. And our first item is the minutes of the last meeting. They were circulated to all registered participants with their joining instructions. I know it's been quite a while, but are there any matters of accuracy or amendments required that anyone can recall? Okay. In that case, I formally resolve that the presented draft minutes are accepted as an accurate record of the meeting held on the 15th of October 2019. And I will pass across to Sonya for the Chief Executive's report for 2019-20, but with some contributions from our supporters and service users. Sonya, over to you.
Thanks, Roger. I'm just going to share my screen with everybody. Hopefully you can all see that. So welcome everybody. It's always quite an unusual thing to do, to talk about the year that's just gone past. And actually we're talking about a year that ended at the end of March 2020. And the world has changed so significantly since then. We'll talk a little bit about what we're doing currently and what we're going to do over the next few months a little bit later in the meeting. But it's really important for us to celebrate all that we've achieved and to really recognise the contribution that my colleagues, our trustees, our volunteers, our supporters, our donors, our fundraisers have made to enable us to support children and adults with ME and their families. I'm going to talk first of all about what we have done to improve lives. Our team have responded to over 1,800 calls and emails to provide direct support to children, to adults, to families and to carers over the year. That's 6 times every working day, and we respond to calls around anything from I think I might have ME, to my doctor doesn't believe me, to I'm feeling suicidal, I can't access school, nobody's listening to me. The whole range of situations and experiences that my skilled colleagues deal with is quite vast. And what we aim to do is to be there and provide support and to listen in any shape or form that those individuals need. On our online ME Centre or our website, we have a whole range of resources that can be accessed free of charge. And also we ensure that we post out resources for those that can't access things online. And those resources were accessed over 25 times every single day. We have a number of different forums. We have a specific forum for children and young people, and we have a forum for adults, our ME Friends Online. And we have over 4,000 registered members who are on there at all times of the day and night, providing peer support to each other. What we see with children and young people is that often children and young people just want to talk about life in general and hobbies and other things. And for adults, we see quite a lot of people asking for support, giving support, just being there, ensuring that nobody feels alone and reducing isolation. One of our projects that we've talked about in previous AGMs is our Mentor ME project up in Scotland. And we have around 30 mentors and mentees that are supporting each other. Our mentors are there to work alongside individuals to help them with a whole range of issues that they have, or to just be alongside them when they need them most. But actually what we hear from our mentors is they get a huge amount back from that. We're now going to hear from one of our mentees, Kirsty, who's going to talk to you a little bit about her experience. I believe we're having a bit of an issue with sound here. Just bear with me, I'm going to try sharing the screen again so that hopefully you'll be able to hear Kirsty.
Hello, I'm Kirsty and I am a mentee with the Mentor ME project. I loved my life before ME. It wasn't perfect, but it was my life, and I was free to choose unconditionally how I lived and spent my time, which centred around exercise and socialising with friends. Having ME has stolen that from me. It's negatively affected every part of my life, all the different relationships within it. 6 years on, whilst I'm getting better, it's really hard to imagine ever having the same type of fitness level, options and choices that I had before, and that's really difficult to accept. I think it would have been really difficult without my mentor, Hannah. She's been a huge support, somebody to speak to specifically about managing my everyday life that I'd previously taken for granted. Having regular contact with someone who's experienced or supported someone else with aspects of what you're going through is invaluable. Somehow, despite still holding down a reasonable job, I genuinely need to be reminded why I can't do the most simplest of things all at once, such as stripping the bed, doing multiple loads of laundry and hanging everything up between tidying and cleaning my home. Having an ME mentor who reminds me of the basics on a regular basis and gives me suggestions about how to achieve the small things has definitely helped my energy levels to recover and improve. Despite the frustrations, when I look back, I have come on leaps and bounds, and what might seem very minor to others has been life-changing for me. I can now do the household basics, hold down my job, and still have the energy to socialise with friends and colleagues and not have to deal with the dreaded payback. I don't think I would have had much of a life. When I look back now, getting out of bed was a massive challenge, and I could take a couple of hours, especially as I was in so much pain. I think instead of a very gradual upward curve, with a few blips and bumps along the way, it might have been a very different story. I kind of envisage it involving heading down a very steep hill on a set of roller skates at incredible speed. In my imagination, it's great fun and a huge adrenaline rush, but before you know it, you're at the bottom and you've hit a wall, and then you have to clamber your way back up, only to continually slide back down with no knee pads or helmet, and there's really no coming back from that. Having an ME mentor has enabled me to gradually improve managing my energy levels so I can do things without payback.
We've also been working with children, young people, families and schools and other professionals working with children and young people. You'll see on the screen that we've undertaken some workshops with school staff and also over 100 pupils in Scotland through our Educate ME programme. Our Children and Young People's service has been growing, and we have provided support to both parents but also to children and young people themselves. And we're going to hear now from Lloyd and Lisa, who tell us a bit more about their experience and the difference that our support made.
I'm Lloyd, and this is my mum.
And I'm Lisa, and I'm Lloyd's mum.
I've been unwell for a significant period of time, and the last time I was well was probably about 10 years old, so it's been a long road, and I don't really have much recollection of what it was like before.
And ultimately we just ended up in a space where Lloyd was practically, it felt to me like you were literally bedridden for a good year. So I started to Google and I found Action for ME, and it was kind of, you know, just on a whim really. I thought, well, I'll ring up and just see, it might be good for me to talk about this to somebody, because I was starting to feel for the first time quite overwhelmed with it. And obviously you have those kind of thoughts where your child has been unwell for so many years, they're about to turn into adulthood, and you do start having dark thoughts about, you know, are we ever going to be through with this? Are we ever going to be out the other side? Is my child ever going to come out of his bedroom ever again? Is he ever going to be able to go out and do all the things that young people do, that teenagers do? And your heart starts to break. And although we're a very tough, resilient family, it was difficult for me as a mum at that time. So when I contacted your service, it was such a breath of fresh air to find somebody at the end of the phone who instantly had time, instantly wanted to listen. And I'm apologising, almost saying I don't want to bore you with my story, but I've got this predicament, and I can't remember the name of the lady that I spoke to. But she was so kind and she had so much time and she wanted to know the story. She wasn't trying to hurry me, and she said, and it was almost an outpouring. It was quite a healthy thing for me to do, to to be able to offload all of that, because I hadn't done since he was 10 years old. So actually that one conversation for me as a mum helped me to get all of that out.
Just sharing on screen now some of the outcomes that we measure. It's really important that we understand what difference we make by providing our support services, and importantly that we're using the money that we're given from our donors and the trust funders and the community fundraisers that are raising money for us. And so we have got better over the last financial year in measuring those outcomes and really listening to the feedback from people like Lloyd and Lisa and others, not just those who tell us we're doing a fantastic job. And I hear that all the time. The work that my colleagues do and the support that they provide is fantastic, but we don't always get it right. And sometimes we can very definitely get it better. And so we listen very carefully, and we've certainly worked very hard over the last year to improve that. I'm now going to tell you a little bit about the work that we do to inspire action from others. We share a lot on social media, and I'm sure some of the people in our audience today will engage in that as well as observe what happens. But we have a Facebook post that was shared or reached over 75,000 people. And that post was an article that we had in our Interaction magazine that compiled some information from an individual called Mark Guthridge. And that article has been shared so significantly, and we hear from individuals that say it's made a real difference because they've shared it with their doctor, their teacher, with family members, and even just this week it's been reshared again on social media. We use the stories like those that you've heard so far, and our case studies and the interviews and letters and the responses and statistics from the big survey that Sam talked to you about last year, to help raise understanding and awareness of ME and the services that we provide. And collectively, those stories, etc., have reached over 10.4 million people. We save a huge amount of money by writing letters to online press and print press to help raise awareness, and we capture the amount of money that we save through our advertising value. And you can read more about that in the annual report that was circulated with the information about today's AGM. As many of you will know, we've been working to put people at the heart of the consultation around the NICE guideline. That's due out the draft guideline is due out in a few weeks' time, and we will be undertaking a consultation to make sure that the voices of children and adults with ME and their carers help inform the final sort of guideline. We've also undertaken a lot of policy work, and one of our real successes was around the Blue Badge campaign, and again, information is available in your annual report. But there's also activity that we haven't shared. So, for example, during the election year, we engaged with over 1,500 potential candidates, and of those, 300 people came back and committed to having meetings with us if they were successful. Obviously, not all of them were, but where people were successful, Sam and the team have been contacting them, engaging with them, sending through questions to be asked in Parliament, encouraging them to attend the all-party parliamentary group, which has recently been set up again by Carol Monaghan, MSP, and also responding to questions that come from MPs' constituents, and also making them aware of some of the kind of themes and issues that are coming through from people that use our services.
Hi, I'm Emily. I'm a paramedic and I had severe ME as a teenager. So I've worked with Action for ME to begin to tell my story. I've written an article for Interaction, which is the Action for ME magazine, and a longer version that's going to be published in the Healthcare Review Journal series, and that hopefully will start to engage healthcare professionals talking about ME and encourage future learning and research. So the most important thing for someone with a chronic illness is to be heard and is to be believed. And as healthcare professionals, we're not always sure what's wrong with somebody, but the most important thing is to provide care and compassion to our patients, and that must be the top priority. We won't make significant progress with this disease until all healthcare professionals are better informed, they're better able to research the disease, and they're able to offer better care to patients. Health professionals that better understand ME would reduce the fight that we all have to go through to get the help and to change the lives of so many people.
During the last financial year, we have worked with Dr. Nina Muirhead and others around the medical education work, and I'm going to say a little bit more about that later. And then lastly, investing in change. As many of you will know, we work very closely with Sir Stephen Holgate and others on the UK CFSME Research Collaborative, or the CMRC. And during the last financial year, we ran a conference, and you can see that the films were viewed over 2,500 times. And those conferences are really important because they bring together the UK and international scientists to share updates on their research, but also to form new collaborations. We've had, during the last couple of conferences, we've had lots of discussions that fed into the work that has been undertaken for the application for the Decode ME study, which is the world's largest genetics study that will be undertaken with 20,000 people. And although the announcement was made in June this year, so out of the financial year, most of the work was undertaken in the year that we're sort of talking about now. This study is, as Roger said right at the beginning, is hugely exciting, it's hugely ambitious, and the funders are calling it a door opener. And that, aside from the research, which is very important, that is another important point. We don't want to just stop here. There is so much more that we need to do to get the research funding level up to where it should be to meet the need that exists. As a charity, we don't have the millions of pounds needed to be able to invest in that research. So what we do with our research strategy is to invest in early stage career researchers and bring individuals into the field that might not otherwise have come in, and to increase funding. And we do that through our PhD studentships. Each of our PhD studentships are match funded either by a university, or, as is the case at Edinburgh University, that is match funded through the Chief Scientist's Office in Scotland. And then we've also been working on the priority setting partnership, and we have recently just pulled together the steering group. We have a fantastic group of people with the illness, their carers, and also clinicians, and we're in discussion around how we can engage with young people. And this piece of work is going to be hugely important because it will help us to set the research priorities as defined by people with the illness, their carers and clinicians. And we all know that at times that those individuals have not been listened to, and priority setting partnerships give a real voice to those individuals. And we anticipate that that will help shape the clinical research for the future. And this last screen, some of you who attended last year's AGM will remember watching the films from Josh and Marissa. Both of those are our PhD funded students. And on the screen, you will see a quote that Josh shared recently at our Action for ME research panel. And it was totally unprompted, and it felt really important to demonstrate to you the impact, the value of the research funding that we put in place. And what Josh basically said was that without this funding, he wouldn't have been in this field. He wouldn't have been undertaking the DNA research that he's undertaking, and we wouldn't have had the match funding from the Chief Scientist's Office in Scotland. So that's it in terms of a look back over the last financial year. I'm now going to hand over to our Treasurer, Philip Marsden, who's going to take you through the Treasurer's report, and I will join Philip afterwards for some questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Sonia. That's terrific. Well, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Philip Marsden, and I'm your Treasurer. And I'm going to take you through our financial results for last year. That's the year to 31st of March, 2020. Sam, next slide. We've lost Sam on the slides. Thank you. Firstly, here is the income and expenditure for our charity for the year, for the last 5 years. The green columns are income and the yellow columns are expenditure. And obviously the difference between the two is the surplus or deficit. And you can see they go up and down each year. I'm just going to run you through very quickly the past years just to give context for the year to March 2020. So just starting on the left there in 2016, the first set of columns, we had a £200,000 surplus in that year because we had some exceptional legacies. In a sense, all legacies are exceptional, but sometimes they are larger than we can budget for. In 2017, income was at a much more normal level, at around 680,000, and we ran a small deficit. In 2018, so that's the middle columns there, income rose, again due to exceptional legacies, and also we had the first year of the Big Give Christmas Challenge, which has been very important to us. Expenditure in 2018 rose as well, and that was mainly due to the inclusion of AIM's children's services after the merger with the AIM charity at the end of the previous year. And the result was still a large surplus because of the exceptional income that we'd had. In 2019, income reduced due to much lower legacies, but included a fundraising dinner in that year, which pushed up our income. And of course, we had the second Big Give challenge. But we increased our expenditure substantially in 2019, funded by the surplus in the previous year, and that was spent on funding all our activities. So the result was a planned deficit of 166,000 in 2019. Now, the columns on the right are the year which we're now looking at, which is to March 2020. And in this year, the income reduced by 12% to £950,000, almost entirely because we didn't have a second fundraising dinner in that year. We didn't have a fundraising dinner. Expenditure reduced too by 21% to about 986,000, partly due to no cost for a fundraising dinner, and partly due to lower spend on charitable activities generally, which reduced our deficit overall to £36,000. So we ran a small deficit in 2020, funded by previous surpluses. Now let's look at income in more detail. Sam, if you could have the next slide. Thank you. And here we've got a pie chart showing our incoming resources, which is our income, all our income. And this is how it's made up. So if we look first at the very big yellow slice, the sort of lime yellow slice, which is most of it actually, 828,000. This is donations and legacies. So this is almost exactly the same amount as in 2019. So we did about the same again in 2020. Represents 87% of all our income. And we're going to look at that in a bit more detail in the next slide. The green slice over on the lower left-hand side is income from charitable activities. So this is member subscriptions, sale of publications and journals, and it was pretty well the same as in 2019. And the small blue slice there is other income. And this year, 2020, there was a large reduction in other income because we didn't have the fundraising dinner, which I mentioned earlier. So donations and legacies are shown in more detail in the next slide, and now we'll go on to that. Thank you, Sam. So here we have a pie chart for donations and legacies. Remembering that the total of donations and legacies was about the same as 2019, though the breakdown is slightly different. Starting in the top left corner, so that's the lime yellow slice, this is trust donations, donations from trusts, which were similar to the high level that we reached in 2019. And then the orange slice, which is the upper right-hand side, is all our general donations and appeals. This includes the third year of Big Give, which was important to us, and of course all our community fundraising, as well as all other donations. In total, that slice, the general donations and appeals, was down about 10% compared to 2019. The lower right slice, I call it the mango slice, it's actually some more yellow on more yellow on the screen now. That yellow slice is legacies, and the legacies were 35% up last year. Legacies, as I've said, always vary a lot between years. They're not forecastable for obvious reasons. The blue slice is tax recoverable, so gift aid, and that's down slightly because donations were down slightly on the year. And then the green slice is grant income. Grant income, it was exactly the same as in 2019, as grants tend to be given on a multi-year basis, so they tend to be very much the same each year. While we're talking about income, let's just look at our amazing community fundraisers. Sam, if you go on to the next slide, there we are, thank you. Here is a bit of detail on those community fundraisers and how we raised all this money from the community. There was money from bakers and crafters. We sold Christmas cards, obviously. We had the raffles and lotteries, runners and cyclists, many of them, and even skydivers. And we had 9 Walk with ME teams as well. So the money from community fundraising is very diverse, extremely welcome, and very, very valuable to us. And we thank all our volunteers for raising all that money for us. And overall, we raised about £7 for each £1 which we invested in fundraising during the year. So that's 7 to 1, which is a very good ratio for charities. And indeed, it's higher than in previous years. For instance, in 2019, we raised £4.20 for each pound invested. So that was a good result. And then I'm going to give you some detail on the Big Give Christmas Challenge of last year. Sam, if we can move on the slide, there we are. So the Big Give Christmas Challenge, which has become very important to us, and we raised in the year to 2020, 144,000 from 492 different donors. So that is our best year yet, our third year. Of course, we'll be participating in Big Give again this year, in the current year, and we've already secured a £50,000 match pot from major donors, and therefore every £1 that people give us during Big Give will be doubled, automatically doubled by the match pot, which is fantastic. So stand by for Big Give coming along in November. It'll be a very important source of income for us this year. Now let's look at expenditure. Sam, if we have the next slide, there we are. Resources expended, this is all our expenditure. Our total expenditure, as I mentioned earlier, in the year to March 2020 was £986,000, which was a reduction of 21% on the previous year. The large orange slice represents 83% of our expenditure in the year, and that's money spent on charitable activities, which is all the things we want to do, the campaigning, awareness, information and welfare services, children's services, advocacy and research. It reduced 17% since the previous year, and we'll look at this in a bit more detail in the following slide. Just moving on to the little yellow slice at the bottom of the pie there, 35,000. This is governance costs, the cost of governing the charity, and I'm pleased to say it's clearly a very small slice, and it's only 4% of our expenditure in the year, which I think is pretty good for a charity, and was exactly the same as last year. The blue slice is the cost of generating our income. I referred earlier to the fact that we've generated about £7 for each £1 of cost we put into fundraising, which again is good for charities, in my view. The cost reduced by 49% since last year, largely due to the fact that we didn't have the cost of a fundraising dinner, which we'd had in 2019. So now some further detail of that large orange slice, charitable activities. Sam, if we could have the next slide. No, we've gone too far. Charitable activities, slide 8. That's the one, thank you. This is expenditure on charitable activities, and it's split into the main categories of cost there down on the right. As I've said, charitable activities account for 83% of our spending, so the great bulk of our spending, obviously. And the biggest part of that is the yellow slice, which is 58% of our spending, and that's information and services. And these include telephone lines, children's support, the online ME Centre, advocacy, and all the details are set out in our Trustees report. We were able to reduce costs significantly here this year by not filling certain vacant positions and by reorganisation to become more efficient. Moving on to the blue slice on the left-hand side there. Sam, that's it. Same slide, thank you. The blue slice there on the left-hand side is campaigning and influencing, representing 34% of our charitable activities, and that increased this year. And then finally, the green slice in the bottom central is biomedical research. That represents about 8% of our total charitable activities, and has reduced as we are now funding just the 2 PhD-ships in biomedical research, which Sonya has talked about. The big project just starting, the Decode ME project, is of course being financed outside our charity, so it doesn't appear in our biomedical research costs here. It is separate, even though Action for ME is co-leading it. So that is a separate amount, and in addition to this 65,000 of research spending which we have in the charity. Okay, Sam, on to the next slide, which is our last slide. And this just shows the picture of accumulated funds. Now, accumulated funds are our capital and reserves for the future. And you can see from the bar chart that the funds go up and down according to whether we run a surplus or a deficit in each particular year. This year, as I've said, we ran a small planned deficit of £36,000. So our funds have reduced by £36,000 from 2019 to 2020. And they now total £526,000, so about £500,000 in total. Now, those funds divide up into 3 elements. The yellow section, which is the top of each bar, represents funds which are restricted by their donors to spending on specific projects, so such as research, children's services, Scotland services, advocacy, and so on. And restricted funds of this nature totaled 216,000 at March 2020. Sorry, 2020, March to 2020. The blue section, which is the bottom part of the bar, is unrestricted funds. They're unrestricted general funds which we can use for any purpose. And they totaled £220,000. And the green section in the middle in 2020 is designated funds. Now, designated funds are unrestricted funds, but which we've designated voluntarily for in this year, for the mitigation of our potential drop in our income due to the COVID-19 lockdowns, and also to support a likely increase in demand for our services, including, quite probably, from long COVID sufferers. So in total, we had reserves of just over £500,000. Now, this represents, or at least the unrestricted funds, the unrestricted element represents about 3.5 months worth of our monthly expenditure. And we have a policy of maintaining between 3 and 5 months worth of expenditure in our reserves. So we're about 3.5 at the year end against our policy of 3 to 5. But in addition, we held another 1.5 months of unrestricted expenditures in designated reserves. So we had 3.5 in completely unrestricted and 1.5 months in designated. So overall, a healthy balance sheet at the year end. Now, this is just as well because, of course, the COVID-19 lockdown and continued lockdowns now happening. The first lockdown started right at the end of our financial year and seriously knocked our fundraising, in the current year, the year that we're now in. However, we forecast our income and, of course, all our costs. We furloughed staff and we reduced costs generally to ensure we remain viable even in our worst case scenario. So that's what we did. And in fact, since then, we've received some unplanned legacies and indeed some unplanned donations. So we're currently running comfortably above the reforecast. All can change. It's a very uncertain climate. The fundraising climate is always uncertain, particularly as we go into further lockdowns, and we don't know how Brexit is going to turn out. Nevertheless, I can tell you I'm confident that we will have the funds to continue our vital services for people with ME, and I'm not concerned. There we are. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Philip.
Thank you, Sonia. It's now time for our first question session, which is aimed at picking up questions on Sonia and Philip's report. I know there have also, though, Sonia, been some questions that have come in through email, so perhaps I could pass to you to deal with the questions we've had come in so far.
Thank you, Roger. And we've moved a couple of questions to after the forward look. But we've had quite a lot of discussion online and also through one of the support groups around flu jabs, and that's obviously very topical every year, but also more so because of the COVID situation. So the question we've received is that many of the Stockport ME Group's members are being refused a free vaccine, as they are told having ME CFS in itself does not qualify one for a free jab. And we've been asked what our position is and what can be done here. So I think it's an important distinction as a UK organisation to make that in Scotland, people with neurological conditions are not listed among those eligible for a free vaccination, but they are in England, Wales and Northern Ireland. And from our perspective, given that ME is listed as a neurological condition by NHS England in their SNOMED system, that's the system used by GPs for electronic health records, and also by the World Health Organization, it therefore follows that people with ME should be eligible for a free flu jab. Now, I say that knowing it's not that straightforward, and indeed we have this discussion with my doctors every year in relation to my son. So what we are doing as an organisation is developing a template letter or email that you can use to share with your GP about this if you are being refused a flu jab, even though you are eligible if you're living in England, Wales and Northern Ireland. This should be available on our website by the end of the week. We have a question online from Keith, but Keith, I hope you don't mind. We're going to take that in the next round of Q&A.
Any more questions through the Q&A function? Okay. In that case, we'll move on to the next item of business, which is a proposal for the reappointment of Ed Stephens and Jane Stacey as trustees. We've reached the end of their current terms, and as of course is subject to the result of our supporting membership postal ballot, of which the results were as follows. Jane Stacey, 29 yes, 1 no, 1 no preference. And for Ed Stephens, 30 yes, none, 0 no, and 2 no preference. So I'm delighted to confirm Jane and Ed's reappointment as trustees for another 3-year period. I'm afraid we also sadly have to take some acknowledgement of some trustee resignations as various terms come to an end. So first of all, we're sad to say goodbye as a trustee to Chris Cundy, who actually joined the board in 2008. So 12 fantastic years service. So Chris, many thanks to you. And we very much hope that you will stay in touch with us and that we can draw on your support going forwards. But obviously, it is now an appropriate time to be stepping down from the board. But we really appreciate the service that you've given us. And Jane Young joined in 2012, so 8 years ago. Again, fantastic service to us, and we hope to maintain strong relationships. Andy Dougan has reached the end of a 3rd-year term and does not feel he can commit to support going forwards, and so he is also stepping off the board. We will have a process in place. We do have a process in place to build a pipeline of potential future trustee candidates, and no doubt at the next AGM we'll be bringing some of them forward for election. I have another item of business for handing back to Sonya, which is approval of the appointment of our auditors, formerly known as Moore Stephens, now known, I believe, as Moores or Moore. First appointed in 2018. Do I see any objections? I don't think I do. Very well. Then Moores are formally appointed again as our auditors. Sonya, the Chief Executive's forward view. Over to you.
Thank you, Roger. I'm just going to share my screen again, and I will just have to move us back down. And I should say, as I'm trying to find the right slide, that I need to own up to the fact that it was actually me pressing the buttons earlier and took over from Sam and messed it up, Philip. So I apologise. Do make mistakes occasionally, and I'm happy to own them. So I'm now going to talk to you about the work that we've been doing over the last 6 months, and also that we plan to do for the remaining 6 months of our current 5-year strategy. As you're all aware, and as already been acknowledged today, this year was totally thrown up in the air, and we've faced a lot of uncertainty and had to make a number of changes. But I feel that we've got ourselves into a position where we not only have got back in terms of the financial position, as Philip has said, but also actually we're delivering more for people with ME.
Being unwell has restricted the amount I'm able to do on an everyday basis. I'm not able to do some of the things that I love most, and that has been very tough. It's also hard to plan ahead because you don't know how you're going to feel on that day. You could be well enough to go out with your friends, shopping, or you may not even be able to get out of bed. It's also affected my education, as I'm only able to go to school for about 2 hours a day, and when I get home I'm not well enough to do any homework or catch up with any work. Having a pen pal with Emmy has really helped me because it's someone who understands what you're going through and is going through it with themselves. As much as my wonderful friends have tried to help and are there for me, they don't fully understand what I'm going through and know how everything feels because they haven't gone through it themselves. My advice for other people with ME is that they aren't alone, and having a pen pal has really helped me realise that.
So that was Maria talking about our children and young people's peer support service, and she describes the pen pal service, which is one of the many things that we offer. That includes the birthday card scheme. We know, and I painfully know as a parent, that when your child is very ill, not in school, not socialising, actually they get very few birthday cards. So getting a birthday card from another young person can be so powerful and so meaningful. On the 1st of April, in direct response to the COVID pandemic situation, we restructured and pulled together all of the work that we do, supporting children and adults to improve lives, into one service called the Crisis Support and Advocacy Service. And at the same time, we extended all of our services across the UK. Previously, for example, our advocacy service was a pilot running just in the Southwest and in the Midlands, and we had a waiting list. And what we wanted to do was prioritise being there to support people at the time they needed us most. And we restructured to ensure that we could eradicate our waiting list and put as much of our resources into that as possible, whilst also not neglecting the work that we were doing to create a better understanding, to inform and influence individuals, and of course continue our research PhD funding. So what we're hoping to achieve over this next year is shown on the screen in terms of our crisis support and advocacy service. This is really ambitious, particularly on a much reduced team. And as Philip said, we have been able to do reasonably well financially so far, but we do expect that to change. We all know that the next sort of 6 months, a year, 18 months, and even beyond that is going to be very difficult, particularly as we're in the second wave. There's going to be an impact from that in terms of finances available, but also from Brexit. So what we're doing is making sure that we're keeping an eye on what's happening externally, keeping a very close eye on our finances, but most importantly, ensuring that we do not take away anything from our current service provision. We have seen that our advocacy service has been very well utilised, and I have to say that we're dealing with much more complex situations, people that are being left in very, very desperate situations with no support, no care, and even in some circumstances, no food. We want to be able to grow and extend those services, and we're currently thinking about what our new 5-year strategy is going to look like. We are committed to continuing our crisis support and advocacy service, not just at its current level, but also ensuring that we're there to meet additional need if we experience that. What we have had through this last 6 months, 7 months, is an opportunity for those people who have no direct experience of ME themselves or through their family members to get insight into what life in lockdown is like. And many of you that are watching at the moment, and others that we engage with and watching afterwards through a recorded film, will know that that experience of lockdown, and will not only have experienced it for 6 or 7 months, but actually experienced it for 6 or 7 years, and sadly sometimes a lot longer. So one of the things that we want to do is to make sure that ME, alongside long COVID, is not forgotten. We have seen for far too many years that people with ME are neglected, and that they face a lack of understanding, and they're not able to access services. And it is absolutely critical that we continue our awareness raising work. Alongside that, we will continue with our policy work. We're a very active member of Forward ME. We play a part in the medical education group, as I mentioned earlier, and currently are in discussion with some of the other charities around how we can boost the excellent work that that group is doing and provide support to Dr. Nina Muirhead, who is doing a fantastic job. As some of you will know, there is e-learning available now for doctors, and we want to see that grow and develop and ensure that there are more resources available, particularly once we get the NICE guideline at the beginning of next financial year. We don't know what's going to be in there. I anticipate there'll be things that we agree with and there may be things that we disagree with. But as I said earlier, we will be ensuring that we undertake a wide consultation to ensure that the voice of people with lived experience of ME are not forgotten. The other thing that we're thinking about at the moment is broadening the groups that we work with and thinking about how we can undertake more targeted policy work. There is a real opportunity, as I said, around the insight and glimmer into what life is like with lockdown and some of the experiences of people that people are facing through long COVID. And we need to make sure that we don't lose that opportunity. So our policy work will be more targeted. Mentioned earlier on around the Decode ME project, that is going to be a core feature of our work over the next 6 months and indeed into the forthcoming years. We're working with Professor Chris Ponting and our colleagues to be able to move that work forward and get the planning in place so that we can open the recruitment early next year, hopefully in the spring. And alongside that, we're supporting the patient and public involvement group. And I have to say, that group of individuals are absolutely fantastic. They have gone above and beyond in terms of supporting the work, challenging us, keeping us on our toes, and telling us when we get it wrong and helping us to improve that. And that's something that we have been working to enhance as an organisation. And as we move into developing our new strategy, we will ensure that we engage with our patient reference group and our other focus groups to help us ensure that we're able to deliver the support and care that people need, and that we're there to extend what we do and reach more people. We're also in discussion around the Claire Francis Research Fund Fellowship. I talked a couple of years ago about the NIH relationship that we were forging and that we hope to put out a call for a joint fellowship. For various reasons, that has not happened, but we are in discussion with another organisation abroad to release a call in the or to at least announce a fellowship in the not too distant future. I'm really hopeful this time that comes off, and I think what we have done is, whilst we were very disappointed that we weren't able to take forward the NIH fellowship, we have found another opportunity, and we will continue to ensure that we take opportunities when they arise, but also seek to create those. And I think that we will have that opportunity through the priority setting partnership, as I mentioned earlier on. As we move into our new strategy, we know that we need to extend our services and reach more people. We need to do more to reach people that we're not currently reaching, particularly those from Black, Asian, minority ethnic groups, those with more severe ME who live in geographically hard to reach areas, and to also make sure that we're working more with children and young people and not just parents. We need to do more around health services. It's woefully poor at the moment and woefully lacking. And that's something that we anticipate will feature in our new strategy. We'll continue to do that alongside raising awareness and understanding, our press and our media work, and to also continue to explore other funding opportunities for research. So that's the end for me in terms of our forward look. I just want to say a personal thank you. I know Roger has thanked already, but a personal thank you to my colleagues. I can't do what I do without the team behind me, and that includes the staff team, our huge number of volunteers, the people that have given their time to talk about their experiences today, our community fundraisers, our donors, our supporters, and others. Thank you so much for all that you do to help us ensure that we end the ignorance, injustice and neglect experienced by children and adults with ME. Thank you.
Right. So time for any remaining questions. And there are a few now building up. As I look at them, Sonya, I think they're all going to fall to you, I think. Two from Nick and one from Keith.
Okay. So so the first one from Keith: is there a push for more NHS specialist services for ME, CFS, and now post-viral long COVID illness? And what I'm going to do is tie in some of the online questions that we've had into that answer. So I think as an ME community, we know that like ME, people with long COVID have a very real and disabling condition. And what we're seeing with long COVID is that some people recover relatively quickly, some appear to have a delayed recovery, and others seem to have no recovery or get worse. And it's concerning to see that long COVID, like ME, is being labelled as a medically unexplained illness. This is wrong, and we know that from many, many years of experience, the ME community knows what helps with managing post-exertional malaise and fatigue, and that's pacing and rest, and not recommending that people push through it. So there's a real opportunity with research for both people with long COVID, people with post-viral conditions like ME. And we have the potential opportunity to understand what's delaying or preventing recovery, and also what is restoring people's health. And our job is to ensure that this opportunity is not lost, and that the neglect of people with ME stops, and that we finally see the investment into the research, the treatments and the care that every single individual with ME and their families deserves. And so I think we have a real opportunity now, and we have to take that. I think it's fantastic that the NHS are putting money into supporting people with long COVID, post-viral COVID. What we have to ensure is that that doesn't distract from what people with ME need and deserve, and indeed should get. And so whilst we aren't pushing directly for more specialist NHS services currently, we are wanting to hear from clinicians around what the impact has been for them. And I do not know what the current picture is in terms of funding for specialist services. But we need to ensure that ME isn't forgotten within that. And I think that's something that we will be taking into consideration in terms of our new strategy, and speaking with those in specialist services, but also those outside, and listening to the responses of over 4,000 people from our big survey in terms of what's helped them and what's not helped them, alongside what comes through from the NICE guideline review, and also what people tell us through that consultation is going to be really important. So Keith, I've kind of rolled your question into several others that we had online. We're not pushing at the moment, but that is certainly something that we're keeping a watching brief on, and of course we will take action as we need to. And if you have information about funding and services being cut, then we'd really welcome that coming through to us. The next question I have on my screen in front of me is from Nick. Are you planning to roll out any of the regional services nationally? Earlier something was mentioned as only being running in Scotland, and on social media there's been a thing only for people in the Bath and North East Somerset area. So I was just wondering why some services are local only. Is it in terms of funding? And if there are plans for more national rollout as well. So you're absolutely right, Nick, that we do have some very specific services that are run in specific areas like Bath and North East Somerset, and that is because, as you say, we have funding specifically for that. We are trying to make sure that there are other opportunities, though, so that people aren't disadvantaged. And I would say, if you do see something that's only for a specific area, like the advocacy workshops in Baines, let us know that you're interested. It may be that you can join those, or it may be that we can put something on specifically for you. All of our other services are available nationally. So the advocacy service, children and young people's service, you can phone up, you can email us and seek support that way. The peer mentoring service in Scotland was funded specifically through the Alliance, which is Scottish Government funding. We're coming to the end of the 5-year funding there, and what we're looking to do is to not lose the fantastic work from our mentors and mentees, and we're looking to transition that service to become part of our advocacy service, so that we will have volunteer advocates working directly in Scotland as well as working elsewhere in the UK. We have another question from Nick asking, any update on the campaign on getting the extra £20 a week applied to legacy benefits as well as universal credit? I know you shared a petition a while back. Given that it's almost always people with disabilities and health conditions that have been on benefits long term, so starting to claim before the full universal credit rollout, surely it is discrimination under the Equality Act. But I and most people with ME don't have the money or energy to sue the government. It's a fantastic question. And I'm going to ask Sam, as our policy officer, participation and policy officer, to respond to that.
Hi. Yeah, happy to answer that, Nick. Thanks for the question. So we did this campaign in collaboration with the Disability Benefits Consortium, which is a network of charities. And the idea is that we would secure this £20 uplift to the legacy benefits. Now, people like yourself who signed the petition and added your name to a letter, so that went to the Chancellor over 100 days ago, and he has yet to respond to this. So this is to the DBC as a whole. So what we've been doing is we've been working with those charities. We've joined in a bit of a social media campaign to highlight the fact we're still waiting for a response. And what we're currently doing now is working with a number of MPs who are allies of the group to raise this in Parliament and also through written questions, just to keep putting the pressure on. So hopefully it's a watch this space thing. This is what we're continuing to fight for through our work with the DBC, and hopefully we will get a good response.
Thanks, Sam.
Thank you, Sam. Do we have any more questions through online at all? Okay. In that case, I think it is now time to bring the meeting to a close. Hopefully you found the, oh, I'm sorry, something has come through.
Okay. So this is a question from David Butler from the Sussex ME Society. It says the Society provided nearly all the study subjects for the Brighton Research Project. The Sussex ME Society has not had any recognition of this or any liaison with the Action for ME. Also, what support will be given to local support groups? The Sussex ME Society has provided Action for ME with articles for interaction, but nothing published. So I'll pick that one up, Roger. We don't know who's involved in research projects. Individuals will take part directly with the universities themselves. So I couldn't tell you who is involved and who isn't. We don't get that information, but it's absolutely fantastic if many of those participants have come through the Sussex ME Society. And I know that Brighton University, the research project, I think it's Sussex University, has certainly acknowledged that. In terms of support to local support groups, you're absolutely right. I hear regularly of support groups that are struggling, who are closing, or who come to us for specific support and advice or to use resources. And it is really sad to hear that local support groups are closing and declining in that way. The majority of them, as we know, are run by people who are very ill with this illness and doing the best they can to support others. And that is deeply saddening because as an organisation, we are not local. We are not there in local communities. And we have to find a way to better support local groups. It is something that we have been out and we asked local support groups early on in this current 5-year strategy, and we have been responding to the individual responses that we've had. We do work with local support groups, and certainly we've had some questions through some of those, and we will be looking as we move forward what more that we can do. I think there is an opportunity through the Decode ME project and the priority setting partnership as well to further build relationships, because we need to recruit 20,000 people who are eligible for this particular research study, and we will need the support of the local support groups as well as many others who are not on social media and online. I can't answer why the Sussex ME Society hasn't had any articles published. That's something I will go away and find out. There is a group that work with us for interaction, and a group of our supporting members that help decide what goes into the magazine and what doesn't, and produce articles. And I'm not part of that group that makes those decisions, but I can certainly go away and find out a little bit more. And because we have your contact details, David, we can come back to you on that one.
Okay. Thank you, David. Thank you, Sonia. I will wait just a second to see if any further questions come through.
Another one.
Okay. There we go.
Okay.
Again, Sonia, one for you.
You've spoken as if there are no specialist NHS services for those affected by ME in the UK. Why are you not even acknowledging that 11,000 new referrals per year by BACME members? Why are you not formally even engaging with them? They're hardworking professionals. Well, I think, Colin, as you well know, we do engage with BACME. I have regular contact with a number of BACME members. Indeed, we share the, we sit on the board together for the UK CFS ME Research Collaborative, or the CMRC. And we have had lots of discussions through that forum around how we can better work together and to ensure that research is informing and being informed by clinical practice. So I think it's, you know, it's important to flag that there are specialist services out there and that there are a number of referrals and people receiving support and care. And like everything, we hear good stories, not so good stories, and you know, those that kind of say it helped in some ways and didn't help in others. And so I think the focus of today's presentations has been very much about the work that Action for ME has been undertaking, and that's not directly with those 11,000 individuals that are receiving the support and care through the services, but we do work with the services and we do work with BACME and indeed have regular conversations through the CMRC.
Sonia, again, I'll just hold to see if other questions come through. Okay. Conscious it takes me a little time to type, so there we go. Okay.
This is, I think, Colin, this is probably the last question we'll take from you, because that's 4 from your group now. But as someone that's been a member of the BACME executive, I wish to say you've not met with the executive. I haven't met with the whole executive. We're not a member of BACME and I've not been invited to meet with the executive. I will always, as many of you will know, meet with anybody that invites me to meet with you. I was due to come and talk about the Decode ME study and the priority setting partnership at the BACME conference that was cancelled due to the pandemic. So I'm sure that would have given me opportunity to engage. But as a member, as we're not a member of BACME, that's not a group that I would naturally engage with unless be invited or through the CMRC.
Rather sounds like a conversation that ought to take place outside the AGM forum. So I think we will move on from that one. If there are any other questions from people, I will again wait for a minute or so to see if anything else comes through.
Question from Nick. Do we have an update on the number of sign-ups for the Decode ME study? So the last time I looked, we had over 25,000 people signed up. That was a number of people across the globe. Of those, around 21,000 were from the UK, over the age of 16, and indicated that they would be willing to sign up and participate in the study once that opens. We have been totally blown away by the response, and that's before we've even gone out and engaged with people through the local support groups directly and offline. What we do know is that we expect to have to recruit initially around 45,000 people. That sounds a lot to get 20,000 people, but we know that not everybody will be eligible for this particular study. There are very strict research criteria that are being used. That doesn't mean that you haven't got ME, but it just means that you don't fit the specific criteria for this study. We also know that people may go through that, fit the criteria, and get a spit kit, which is a tube that you spit into, you put it back into the envelope and post it back. And not all of those will get posted back. That may be because people change their minds, they're too ill to be able to participate, or actually they just don't want to be involved. So we're looking to at least recruit 45,000 people to go to sign up as participants and fill in the questionnaire so that we get the 20,000 that we need. In a recent discussion with Chris Ponting, he did say that, if we ended up with more than that, that would be fantastic. So I think it's fair to say that we're all really ambitious, and we're also looking at other opportunities to make sure that any data you give us, your health data alongside your saliva, will be used for future research and can benefit research in as many ways as possible. Then we have another question from an anonymous attendee. What specialist services are there in South East London? What I will do is we have information on our website around where specialist services are. If you contact our team, and if you wanted, you've got Sam's details, you can just reply and give us your email address, and we can send you that information. I'm not sure at the moment. I know some services weren't fully operating because of the pandemic, so I'd rather give you correct information rather than incorrect information. We also have a question from Barry, who asked, do you know the take-up of the Excellent CPD seminar launched recently aimed at GPs? Sam is shaking his head. So he says, no, he doesn't, but he can find out. So again, Barry, if you just make sure we've got your contact details, then we can come back to you on that one. Another one come through. Just want to say thanks to Action for ME Advocacy Service. So that's really good to hear. Thank you for that. Keith, are you aware that insurance companies refuse to insure against ME but don't pay out on claims if it's not declared? I'm aware that happens. I haven't got any specific examples of that at the moment. Certainly that's something that our advocacy service would help individuals with. We had an International Alliance for ME call last night, which is a group that many of you will know I chair, and we set up a few years ago, and we've undertaken some work with the World Health Organization. And our colleague in Australia was talking very specifically about that and the very specific difficulties they have in Australia. But if you have individuals, Keith, that are using your fantastic nursing services that you provide up in Fife, then please do pass them on to, or suggest they contact us, because we definitely can support individuals around that. Keith also says, is that discrimination? My personal view would be yes. I think what we would have to do is to look at specific situations, and certainly what we always do, and I know that Sam and Claire and others are very sort of mindful of this, is that where we think there may be an opportunity for legal action or to work with other organisations to consider challenging discrimination, then we do act on that. So certainly if somebody contacts us and we have that example, then we would, if they wanted us to work with them directly, but also liaise with other organisations. And we did support an individual a little while ago around a specific employment issue that we felt was discriminatory. Okay, there's a comment from Colin, but it's not a question.
So, Colin, I think this is a conversation best dealt with outside this meeting. Any other questions? We'll just hold for a second. Okay, I think we will bring the meeting to a close. Thank you, everybody. I think I would say, having come onto the board during the year, we're not sanguine about the challenges for the year going forwards. Well, I think I would say that your charity is in a good position, a well-run position, to continue to provide strong support for people with ME during the year to come, and that's what we're preparing to do. I want to echo Sonia's thanks for the people who are involved in today, both for the people who gave their time to make films or to make recordings, to the staff of Action for ME for all of their efforts, for the volunteers. I want to say thank you especially to Claire Ogden and to Sam, who have coordinated this event, and to Ruth, who is sitting behind desperately trying to keep track and take minutes. I want to thank the trustees for their time, their volunteering and their efforts. I particularly want to thank Philip for keeping his hands on the tiller on the money front of today's presentation. I want to thank our donors, I want to thank our supporters, and actually I also want to thank Alan and Overy, who under normal circumstances will be providing the building for this meeting, but have given us 16 years of pro bono legal support, which has been very important to us a number of times. And then I want to thank everybody else for coming, and thank you for your questions. And we will now bring the meeting to a close. Thank you very much, everyone.